struggles to vote, our struggles against housing discrimination, our struggles for jobs, our struggles in the educational system, our struggles against police brutality, our struggles against the racism in the criminal justice system in general. And I said, wow, you know, it's good to see that there has been at least some good that has been done by those struggles. And some of the racism in terms of the attitudes of the people, of the white people in this country, must have been broken down, because otherwise why would they be so interested in seeing the history of black people? But then the last episode was shown, and you saw Chicken George and the whole family, you know, making their way. They were going to Tennessee, weren't they? Right? Because he bought some land, remember? Chicken George had bought some land. And you saw them making the level. And 54% of all black families are not even able to live a decent life if you use the standards that have been established by the Department of Labor, the U.S. Department of Labor. 54%. The fact is, in 1976, 60% of black youth could not find a job. And you talk about black women. Hey, you know, we haven't had it this bad in a long time. And you talk about police violence, police crimes. There is a proliferation of police assaults on the black community all over the country. You talk about, talk about the Ku Klux Klan that they showed you in Roots. See, I'm saying this because I think that I want to just interrupt my presentation for a second and say that we cannot succumb to the notion of history that prevails in this country. And one of the reasons now I think that we're beginning to see a lot of black history is because they want that to be black history and just history, the past. Now, like the American Revolution, you know, I mean, what is the American Revolution today? You talk about revolution today, you know, I'm a communist, and I talk about revolution, and people say that, you know, I mean, that's some mad, raving maniac. But what about the American Revolution? This country was founded in revolution, but it has become history buried, dead in the past, and that's what they're trying to do with us. I mean, I think that's why they had that Martin Luther King show on TV, too. Because that's supposed to be in the past, you know, the struggles, the difficulties. Okay. You know, there are probably more political prisoners in this country than at the time when I was in jail, when people knew about political prisoners, when you knew about Huey Newton and Bobby Seale and Erica Huggins and the LA 18 and the New York 21 and the San Quentin 6 and the Soledad Brothers. So who do you know about today? And he can say, you know, hey, we respect human rights in our country after all. Look at who we have in the United Nations. None other than Andrew Young. Not only a black man, but a black man who was involved in the civil rights movement, one of the main figures in the civil rights movement of the 50s and early 60s. And, you know, Andrew Young is, I don't have any problems with Andrew Young as a person, but what I'm concerned about is the way in which his presence in the UN is being utilized in order to justify a foreign policy which is basically designed to prevent the liberation struggles from unfolding in various countries of the third world, and a policy which is designed to keep us as subjugated as possible here at home. Because you remember when Daniel Moynihan was in the UN, hey, nowhere in the world he could set foot on the continent of Africa unless he went to visit Forster, or Ian Smith in South Africa or Rhodesia. Nowhere in the world a racist like that. But then you see that the fact that there is an Andrew Young in the UN relieves, who can go to meet with all of the heads of state in Africa, relieves Carter of the responsibility of having to deal with the violation of human rights at home and the violation of human rights in places like South Africa. I don't ever hear him talking about all of us political prisoners on Robben Island in South Africa. I don't ever hear him talking about Nelson Mandela. Or I didn't hear him talk about the fact that Winnie Mandela just got she's been arrested I don't know how many times. She just got rearrested a couple of days ago. He doesn't protest that, And he focuses all of his attacks on the socialist countries. So that we begin to, so you mentioned, it's funny, you mentioned political repression in this country. And what does that automatically evoke? Are so respected in this country, I want to know, how come we have to pay so much just to go to the doctor or go to the hospital? That's a human right. And then I read these stories about black women who don't have the entrance fee to get into a hospital, who end up delivering their babies on the hospital steps or in the parking lot or in the ambulance, assisted only by an ambulance attendant. Hey, that's a violation a gross violation of human rights. The medical care in this country ought to be free. He talks about socialist countries. Hey, if you go to a socialist country and you talk about paying to, hey, don't talk about that too. But you talk about paying to be treated. Isn't it supposed to be a human right to be able to live in health? Well, why do we have to? If we need an operation and can't come up with the money, why do we have to die? And keep the masses of people in chains. Because why is it that Rockefeller has all those millions and millions of dollars? You give me one example of some real work that he's done. When did he ever go to work? Who does all of the work that produces that wealth? How come they don't get it? Why is it that the ones who do the work got nothing and the ones who don't work got everything? That doesn't sound right. People ask me why I'm a communist, and I say it's very simple. Because I just think there ought to be some justice about things like that. I think that we have a right to the fruits of our labor, and that's what they say in Angola. That's why they're so upset. That's why, Carter and all of them are so desperate, because they know that it's just a matter of time before the people of this country wake up and say, hey, wait a minute now, that belongs to us. And instead of putting all of these billions of dollars into the Pentagon, for weapons, we want some jobs. We want some free medical care. We want some free education, we want free child care, universal subsidized child care, so that all women in this country, and especially black women who need to work, can go to work. Carter talks about the welfare system. People get all upset that there are these women on welfare. Hey, if you look at the wages that black women get, there's no way in the world, even if she could find a job, which most black, women can't, a whole lot of black women can't, let me put it that way, but even if a black woman on welfare could find a job, the wages are so low that she wouldn't even be able to pay child care for her children, By the time she pays child care and deals with transportation to work and pays rent, she won't even have enough left for food. That's the truth. That's the truth. Outstrip anything we have ever seen in the history of this country. Able to talk about the affluent working class as far as white workers were concerned. You know, comfortable life. They could save some money, and you know, after the profits, this economic, the ones some of the magazines say manages because he's young and supposed to be handsome. And, but you see, do you notice how he's being promoted? How you're always reading about the Ku Klux Klan now? You know? And that is why we are witnessing the resurrection of
I'm here at Florida A&M University with Angela Davis, who just spoke at Black History Month convocations here at the university. Angela, you're very famous for many activities in America. I'd like for you to relate to our audience now in the sense of what your activities are centered around at this point in time.
Okay, well, I'm one of the co-chair people of the National Alliance Against Racist and Political Repression, which is an organization we founded after I was acquitted. We felt that if we stopped with my freedom, we would have achieved very little, because there were many, many other people who were victimized by the criminal justice system in this country. There were and there still are many, many others. And there are other manifestations of repression, racist-inspired and political repression. There are, for example, immigrant workers who are under attack, behavior control in the schools and the prisons, the right of workers to strike and be involved in collective bargaining. All of these are the issues that we're concerned with in the Alliance.
Your freedom came about through the very, very serious activity of many committed people around the country. Do you see that kind of activity that brought your semi-freedom, let's use this word, you know, being used to free other brothers and sisters that are...
We have to do that now. Reverend Ben Chavis and the Wilmington 10, for example, so many people in this country are aware of the injustice that's been inflicted upon them, and there have been editorials and even newspapers like the New York Times, the LA Times, the Congressional Black Caucus has come out very strongly against that injustice. And now it seems that the only thing that will force some kind of intervention on the part of the federal government in the case, and that is the only way they can be liberated. The only thing that will do that is a truly mass movement. There exists a mass movement now, a very effective mass movement, but we have to double and triple, quadruple the effects of that movement.
When we try to analyze the difference in the times in the latter part of the 60s and the early 70s when many of your trials and tribulations were occurring, to the latter part of the 70s and the early part of the 80s when the situation with Wilmington 10 and in Southern Africa, these things are happening, there seems to be a lack of as much mass support for the issues in this late date as they were 10 years ago. Could you try to draw some analysis to say where we are?
Okay, I think that has to do in large part with the refusal of the media to cover activities that are going on. One gets the impression that nothing is going on because you rarely see something on television, or if you're not listening to one of the black radio networks, you don't hear anything either. But there are things going on all over the country, and I think that there's probably more concern now, even than during the latter part of the 60s and early 70s. But that concern needs to be articulated in a collective way. It needs to be channeled organizationally. And that's what we're trying to do in the Alliance against a lot of odds. We've been working, for example, on the case of the Wilmington 10 since for 5 years, and it's just now that it's being given some kind of publicity. There is a conspiracy, I think, in this country to create the impression that nothing is happening, that no one wants to see anything, and no one is prepared to go out and struggle. Therefore, many people who are concerned themselves have the impression that they're alone, you see.
Right.
And so I think that is what we have to begin to challenge. And I truly believe that there's more potential now. There's a potential for a greater and more militant mass movement than the one that emerged during the late 60s and early 70s. I'm very optimistic.
Is there a specific role that the black media, the minority media can play in building support for a revolutionary struggle? Or should the black media take a kind of subjective look at the problem versus a so-called objective look at the problem?
Well, you can be very objective and still see. In fact, I think that we're being far more objective when we say that there's a rise in police crimes, when we say that, for example, we're using the government's figures when we say that there's more unemployment now. Unemployment among black people has reached depression-like levels. When we say that black people are receiving less income than 10 years ago, that is very objective, and you can go to the U.S. Department of Labor and get those statistics. It doesn't require any subjectivity to see that the situation in Southern Africa is a situation which requires immediate action. And we know that our government is supporting the apartheid regime because we know about all of the economic interests that are there. So all we have to do is be objective, and we'll get the message across. The black media can be very objective.
Let's talk about some of the issues affecting black people in America in the 70s. Where would you say we are now in the sense of our own political and economic standings in the world? Where would Angela Davis put the masses of black folk and poor people in America?
Well, I think that, as I said, we are worse off today than we have been in 10 years. And a lot of people realize this. It's not accidental that Carter is being criticized not only by people who are involved in radical movements or revolutionary movements, but the NAACP, for example, at their last convention, severely criticized the posture of the present administration toward black people. Vernon Jordan in the Urban League gave a speech in which he pointed out all of the ways in which Carter has refused to come to grips with the desperate problems that exist in the black community. So I think that where we are now is we're in a very difficult situation, very difficult straits, and the only way we're going to find our way out of this situation, this predicament, is through struggle. It's the only way we've been able to survive in this country anyway.
Many of the progressive organizers that I've spoken to in the last couple of years, and maybe I feel this way personally, see the need for a strong internationalist posture developing in the black community. Do you feel that we will be able to organize the black community to accept internationalist ideology?
I think that black people are already extremely sensitive to what's happening in South Africa. My experience has been in speaking in the black community that sometimes there appears to be even more concern about South Africa than there is here, and that's understandable because we can, oftentimes you can see more clearly something that's happening at a distance. I think that we have to organize that sentiment, though, and we have to develop concrete ways of developing support for our sisters and brothers in South Africa. And for example, in the Bay Area, the Longshoremen's Union, and there are a number of black people in that union. There's a caucus that developed in order to create a strategy to support South Africa, and they've been very successful. And this is one of the things they've done. They have refused, all of the longshoremen have refused to unload ships coming in from South Africa. And believe me, the sisters and brothers in South Africa really appreciate that.
One final question, Angela, very briefly. How long will Angela Davis as a woman that's very much concerned about many different fields and very perverse in many different fields, be involved in the struggle to free political prisoners?
Well, I mean, that's a question that will only be answered by the way history itself unfolds. As long as there are political prisoners here, I feel that I have a responsibility to be involved. After all, I wouldn't be free today had not there been a lot of activity, a lot of sacrifices, a lot of energy in the movement to free me. And since I realize that I'd probably be sitting in jail today as opposed to being out in the streets, I feel that I have no other alternative than to use whatever energy I have to ensure that that movement goes forward.
Angela, thank you very much for your time and much success in your efforts around the world to free the people.
Thank you.